This bulk box is full of garbage. I purchased a pallet and I have barely made my money back. Have you heard these statements from resellers before? Have you made these statements? One of the biggest complaints I hear out there is that someone made a bulk purchase to sell on Poshmark and then they say they didn't make any money. And I have been selling basically with bulk being my only source, 97% of my inventory for a few years now. And I buy boxes, I buy pallets, I buy all different kinds. And I guess I've just figured out a way to make the most profit out of them, because if I didn't, I wouldn't keep doing it. And so I don't always understand what people are doing with these bulk purchases and with these bulk boxes and with these pallets that they're buying. I just don't understand it because I haven't had a box I didn't make money from. Like, I just don't get it. So I'm here to share with you whether this is a situation that has happened to you personally or you just hear it out there and so it makes you kind of like nervous about buying in bulk or buying pallets. I want to share with you my specific strategies for bulk sorting. So this can apply to a box, this can apply to a pallet. I might say pallet more just because that's what I usually do more regularly, but you can say a box, you could say a pallet, whatever you're buying in bulk. These piles, these categories, these sorting strategies that I'm going to talk about here, it applies to all of it. Before I get into the actual specific piles and categories, I do need to say it does matter what you buy. So you can't just buy the crappiest box and then be like, I didn't make any money from it. Well, sure, because if you bought crap, you're not going to be able to sell it, and that makes sense. So I do think that there is a level of responsibility that comes to the buyer for knowing what to purchase for your business and doing your homework where everything is going to make sense and making an educated, well-researched purchase. You can't blame it on the liquidator or the wholesaler or wherever you're buying these bulk boxes and pallets from. You can't blame it on them that they didn't give you all the good stuff in your box. I have said this before, like, we all have to put on our big girl pants and we all have to say, I decided to make this purchase, and if I didn't do my due diligence, if I didn't research it, if I didn't make sure that it was right in the reality of what was said, then I cannot blame the person that sold it to me for selling it to me. And so that might be super controversial. You might hate me, but I really do believe this. If you look at a listing and it says may include blah, 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 you cannot assume that you are going to get a box full of those brands. Why would they give you all the good stuff? That wouldn't make any sense, because if they gave you all the good stuff, that meant that Joe Schmo Sally over there didn't get all the good stuff. And what if you happen to be Joe Schmo Sally? Like, it's never gonna work. So liquidators and wholesalers get good stuff and they get crappy stuff. And their job is to mishmash it all together and sell it to someone else. That's their job. And from what I've heard, the profit margins are actually very razor thin and it's a very labor intensive operation. So I don't know all about that business. That's what I've heard from people in that business. And so for me, I appreciate that that business is there because it allows me to do my business. And I think I've just figured out ways to work around the negative parts of their business to make the positives for my business. And I know that was like a long-winded thing, but I think that base level of understanding has to be there in order for this other stuff to work. So if you want me to do a separate video about how to identify good pallets to pick, say, in the comments, pallet picker video, I will do that video and try to come up with some criteria or ways that I go about picking pallets and picking boxes for bulk purchases to sell on Poshmark. But I think that we just need to start with a basic understanding that it is a lot of your responsibility to pick a good box, or at least the best box for you. And once you've done that, now all of the things that I'm going to share with you are going to help you make the most profit out of that box or that pallet. So now let's get into those tips. The general gist, and then we'll get into the specific piles, is that if you get a box of 50 items, you should not be expecting to list all 50 items in your Poshmark closet. if you buy a pallet of 500 items, you should not be expecting to list all 500 items in your Poshmark closet. Let's get that out of the way. That is the baseline. That's where all of these criteria and sorting piles come into play, is that not everything goes into your closet. Point is to separate it out into different criteria so that you can maximize profit, because I do not believe that if you list everything, you will be profitable in the same way that you could be if you didn't list everything. So this is my major deal here. So when I get a pallet, I'm going to go through a lot of my notes because I really don't want to forget anything. So when I go through a pallet, I literally go to the pallet and fill up an empty bin full of the items, and I dump it on a table, and I go through one by one and I sort them into the following piles. So my business is different than yours, so I'm going to tell you the piles that I do first, and then I'm going to tell you some other piles that I used to do that might still be helpful for you, but personally I don't do them anymore, but I still see value in them, perhaps for you if you want. So flaws. This is the first pile. This is the most important pile, because every bulk purchase, unless it's new with tags, and even then you still might have it, is going to have a natural flaw rate. Most wholesalers or liquidators will say a 10 to 15% flaw rate you should expect. And I will say, every once in a while, they miss things. They're humans. And so you might end up with a box that's 20% flawed. Like, it might have just been a bad box. Sometimes that happens and you just kind of have to go with it. Sometimes you get a box that has less than 10% flaws. Sometimes when I order new with tags, I don't have any flaws. So it just depends on the box. But pulling out the flaws in a first initial quick sort is probably one of the most important things, because I don't want to sell anything with flaws. I don't want to miss any flaws, and I don't want to deal with them. Then I have a way to offload them that potentially will bring me money, which will help me make more profit overall from my pallet. So I pull out anything that has a noticeable flaw upon my quick sort, and it goes right into the flaws pile. And so this flaws pile will get packed up into boxes of 30 pounds, and I will send them in a partner kit to ThredUp. And so I was a big ThredUp seller in the past. I had done a course on ThredUp. That is no longer the case. It has changed quite a lot. But what I do still do is pack up flawed items in a partner kit and send them off to ThredUp and get whatever I get for them. So sometimes, even though it's flawed and I don't want to sell it, they will accept it, sell it as a flawed item, and they will give me some money for it. And that money will come in the form of a gift card, and then I can use that to go and buy things that I want to sell. So a lot of times I'll flip it at Athleta, because you can get an Athleta gift card, and I'll take that Athleta gift card and go buy clearance with it and then sell that clearance new with tags in my Poshmark closet. So I've done that a lot, and selling your flawed items in whatever format, for me it's through ThredUp, works really well, because this is basically garbage. These are flawed items that you feel like you cannot sell. And so if you get any money for them, that's added profit immediately to, you're trying to pay off your pallet. So if you spent $2,000 on your pallet, you're trying to pay off $2,000 so you can get into the profit range. And so if I make a few $100s from flaws, that's amazing, because now that's already taken care of towards my balance. So selling off flawed items, sorting out your flawed items, that's pile number one. Pile number two, or sort number two, is the things that I am going to sell myself. You also may want to sort this pile into smaller categories based on season, based on item type. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But the main sort of, I'm taking this item out of the pallet or the box or whatever to sell it myself. I'm going to list this on Poshmark. Those are, you should be your biggest sort out. So for me, if I'm going to list it in my Poshmark closet, it has to have a criteria 95% of the time that it's going to be a $50 listing price. So if I get a Zara palette, I know that I'm going to pull out the dresses, and those are going to be at least a $50 listing. And so those I'm going to sell myself. Jeans, I'm going to do the same thing. But tops may not all be things that I choose to sell myself. If I get a small crop top, I don't want to sell that myself. I'm not going to put that in the sell myself category. We'll talk about that later. But so for me, I pick and choose based on my closet listing criteria what I want to list myself. You and I have different businesses. You may choose to list more things than I do, let's say from the same palette, but it should be based on criteria for your closet, not that I got it in a box, so I'm just gonna list everything that's not flawed. I don't think that's the right way to go. As I go through the next couple of piles or categories with you, you'll understand why, but I don't feel that you should list every single thing from the box or palette. So the next pile is what I call local sale. Now this can mean a couple different things, but for me, because I have 2 style Encores near me and I have several Plato's Closets near me, I'm super lucky. I have endless options to take items that I don't want to list myself or don't feel like it's worth my time or don't think it's valuable enough for me to list myself. If it doesn't meet my closet criteria, I will take it to Style Encore or Plato's Closet and sell it there. And so that's what local sale means for me. You might have other options, but for me, it means selling it to Style Encore. And so this is what I do with the items that are in this in-between stage. If it's not flawed, if I don't want to list it myself, if it's every random crop top, tank top, little shorts, mini skirt that I just don't think is in style, dated item, anything I don't want to sell, it goes to Style Encore or in this local sale category. And this is a way to take an item that, let's say you maybe paid like $4 for. My average sell price when I go to Style Encore is actually a little over $4. So whenever I take a couple of bins there, they never take everything, of course, but whatever they do buy, if I average that out over how many items and how much they paid me, I'm usually making a little over $4 per item. So I know that I could take these items to Style Encore or any local sale option and basically make my money back. Now, some items I actually make a small profit depending on the item. Some items I might take a small loss on depending on the item. And most of the time I'm just breaking even. So for me, this is a great way to make even more profit out of my palette, because if I'm breaking even, it's like they never existed. So if I got 100 items and I sold 50 of them, let's just say 50, to Style Encore, it's like those 50 didn't exist. And so now I'm only dealing with the 50 that are here, and I get to take the money that I made off of those 50 items that I sold to Style Encore off the top of the price of what I paid, and now that's all I have left to break even and profit from. So it's going to be faster to profit because I've already kind of lowered the bar on my investment by getting back some of this money by selling in a different way. The other thing I think about is like, if I had listed all the items, there would be a lot of like B and C grade items. Like I've said, a tank top, a crop top, just a little bralette, like all the random little odds and ends that you get in a box when you buy in bulk, or a pallet when you buy in bulk, that you just don't, like, you're not excited about this. You can't list it for very much. It's not worth that much. Like, maybe it's a little worn out, but it's not really flawed. Like, there's just all that kind of like filler nonsense stuff. If you can get rid of it in this way by selling it in a local sale and the goal is to break even on it, it makes everything so much more profitable because those items are now out of the way and they're not clogging up your store. And I think for as much as it's good that you make a little bit of money or break even money, recoup some money, I think the better benefit is that you didn't spend time to list it, photograph it, steam it, or do any of those things. You're not wasting space storing it. You're not sharing it. You're not sending offers on it. It's not clogging up your store, preventing people from scrolling through your store and seeing high value items in your closet. Like, it's just not doing you any favors by it being in your closet, in my opinion, based off the criteria that I have for myself for my closet. So those are the 3 piles that I do based on my business currently, because I am super picky about the criteria for my closet, because I don't have a lot of patience anymore after doing this for almost 7 years for doing like a lot of the nonsense stuff. I am going to share with you a couple of more piles and a couple of more sorts that could help you make even more profit than I do out of a pallet or a box, because I'm not doing these, but you could, and that would help you extrude a little bit more profit than, let's say for me, where I might just toss something into the flawed pile or sell it locally and break even, where you could do some of these other piles and sorts that would help you make a little more money. Lots, L-O-T-S, lots. You can take some of those smaller, lower value items and lot them up into bundles to sell. This usually gets you a little bit more money than selling them at local sale, but less money than if you sold them individually, but I don't think they're worth your time individually. So a perfect example would be like a t-shirt. I did a J. Crew box a while ago, and I got some New with Tags t-shirts. And so I thought about the idea of lotting up the size small t-shirts and doing a bundle of like 2 or 3 New with Tags J. Crew t-shirts. And I think that totally would have sold. But I'm at the point where I'm grumpy and I don't feel like dealing with it. It doesn't fit my system. It would have confused my virtual assistant. I would need to explain to my photographer how to photograph a bundle like that, which we don't normally do. And so it was a lot of extra logistics that I didn't want to deal with based on my streamlined operation that I have. And so I just skipped it and I sold it to the buy sell trade store, and I definitely left money on the table, but I didn't want to deal with it. But for you, you may not have to deal with all the stuff that I do. You don't maybe have a photographer. Maybe you don't have a virtual assistant. Maybe you don't have the option of a local buy sell trade store to sell it to. So for you, a lot might be a great option, because you could list the J. Crew t-shirt by itself, but how much are you possibly going to sell it for? I don't think it's worth your time to list one individually and sell it. What I do think would be great is if you had 3 small, is to do a bundle of 3 small. That's 1 listing, 1 share, 1 offer, 1 storage. You can shove all those all together. And hopefully 1 sale. That's a good price. And per item, you're going to end up better than I did selling it to a buy sell trade store. But you didn't do all the work. I didn't do all the work. Like, one's good for you, one's good for me. It doesn't matter. You can make your own choice, but selling things in lots is a great way to have a go-between fully listing it by itself in your closet or offloading it in some other way that's lower value. So I think doing lots is a great option, especially if you're newer or just have less things to deal with than me and you're not as grumpy. You should totally do lots because you'll make a little bit more profit. The next option is something I have done. It does work. I don't do it anymore, basically for the same reason that I just said for the lots. I just don't want to deal with stuff that is out of my normal operations. I'm at the point where I've gotten the machine running so well that anytime gum gets in the machine, everything just goes haywire, and I don't want to deal with that. So I'd rather not have gum. I'd rather not deal with that and have the machine run smoothly. So for me, clearance items, specifically setting out a pile for what would already be called clearance items, can be a great way for you to make the most out of some of those lower value items. So if you had lower value items, let's say the t-shirt again, but you didn't have 3 to lot up, you only had 1, well, you don't want to list that yourself your normal way because that's a lot of work. But what if you just took the picture of the front and the back and did a quick listing, like not a great listing, like not your best, but you're not trying to give your best because you're going to price it at $10 and mark them all in a 5 for $25 clearance, and you just have a clearance section in your closet just for these kinds of items. What if you did that? So it wouldn't be like you tried to sell it for full price and then put it on clearance later as a way to get rid of stale inventory. It would be like, I am going into this only going to put up a limited listing with limited work and limited effort. I'm going to sell it for a low price and hopefully get it bundled with other items. And that's going to be a way to just upfront clearance it out. Or maybe if you're on eBay, you put it like on an eBay 99-cent auction just to get rid of it, but it helps you get sales and momentum in your store. So there's lots of things that can be clearance. You can decide what that works well for you, but having a clearance pile is a great way to get rid of items that you don't want to list fully, but still could get listed and sold in a limited way that would bring you a little bit more money than doing it one of the other ways. The next pile or sort that you can do, that I have done, that I don't do anymore, is a garage sale. So every quarter here locally, I used to run a $1 clothing clearance sale. And so I would promote it on Facebook. We have lots of like buy and sell, local little groups on Facebook here. So I just put, posts in all of those. I didn't put any signs. I just wanted it to be like minimal work. And so I just promoted it online and I advertised it as a $1 clothing sale. And so everything was $1. So whatever I put out in bins, whatever I had, I didn't really hang anything up. It was just bins. Everything was for $1. And that at the time was a way for me to get rid of clearance stuff, like things that had been listed, but weren't selling. So it was a stale inventory clearance strategy. However, I also sold items that I purposely pulled out of bulk purchases that I knew I didn't want to deal with. So if I didn't want to list it, it wasn't flawed, and maybe it didn't get purchased at a buy-sell trade store, because maybe it was a dated item. Like usually a buy-sell trade store wants to buy items that are more current. So let's say it was a Zara top, there wasn't anything special about it, and I didn't want to list it myself. It was dated, so it was too old to sell at style Encore. It wasn't flawed, so it was perfectly good condition. What would I do with that? If I had more of them, I could have lotted them, or I could have done a clearance, which I just talked about, or I could just sell it for $1 at this little clearance garage sale. And that's what I did with a lot of items. And so even though oftentimes my cost of goods on these bulk purchases was more than $1, I was definitely taking a loss. It was a way for me to get rid of the item, get rid of a bunch of items at once, and get something back for that item. Because guess what? If you have an item and you don't have any way to sell it, what are you going to do with it? It's not going to be worth anything to you. But at least if I sell it at a garage sale at the lowest possible price, $1, I get $1. So that's good. So every time I did those clearance sales, those garage sales, I made a couple $100s and got rid of a couple hundred items that made it into the clearance sale. So if you can't lot things up, if you don't want to deal with a clearance sale in your closet, if you don't have a buy-sell trade store, maybe you do a $2 clothing clearance sale and you do a garage sale and all your clothing is $2. Or maybe you price things higher and try to break even. You can do whatever you want. I did it as a $1 sale just for like the marketing ploy of it, because they're like, clothing for $1? Okay, yes. And it worked, and I would sell several hundred items in one day. So doing a garage sale style clothing sale could be a great way to, in bulk, as a last resort, get rid of any of those remaining items that didn't fit into any of these other criteria. The last pile that I have, and it might be something you've already been like, Rebecca, but what about the items that you could wash and then they're not flawed anymore? Or what about the items that you could easily mend and then they're not flawed anymore? You wouldn't have to send them to thread up or do whatever else with it. I used to wash items. I used to make piles. I used to say I was going to fix this and fix that. I used to save things for my mom when she would come and snowbird here, because I'm in Florida. She would come from New Jersey for the winter, and I would save up a big bin, sometimes two, of things that needed like mending or a button or this or that, because like I'm not good at that. I've never been good at that. I don't have the patience for it. I just don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to deal with it. My mom would help me. And then in not so many words, she told me she didn't want to help me do it anymore. And so I just made the decision that I was not going to deal with it anymore. You may not be at that stage in your reselling career. You might enjoy sitting there mending things. You might be a great seamstress, sewer, lady person. You might not mind throwing a load of things in the washer. I used to not mind that. Now I just mind anything that isn't in my machine. Just grumpy. But if you don't mind washing things, you could totally have a separate pile for, oops, I found some schmutz, this goes in the wash pile. This needs a button, that goes in the mend pile. And so that is a way for you to potentially get proper pricing for these items and therefore save them from getting only pennies in the flawed items area. And so for me, when I send the flawed items off, I don't make very much money because many of them they don't take because they are flawed. So the items that they do take, when you average it out, it's not that much, but at least it's something. In this situation, if you put it in the wash pile and you wash a whole load of laundry and only, 2 of them don't work out, but all the rest of them do, that's great because now those go into your sell it yourself pile, or some of them go into the style Encore pile and some go into the sell it yourself pile. Now you're able to get better profit for them than if they were in your flawed pile. So if you are someone that can make use of washing and mending and bringing that TLC to certain items, which many resellers do because that's kind of like part of their personal mission in being a reseller is saving the item. If you can do that successfully, you will add a bunch more profit to your overall bottom line for the box or for the pallet just by that one step alone. So I don't think anything that I have shared today is rocket science. I think it's all pretty basic. I just think that it's worked really well for me because I make processes and systems out of things. Like I just can't help it. Like that's my superpower / downfall. So I can't help it. That's just who I am. And so for me, because I look at everything in a logistical process system kind of way, sometimes it just puts a perspective on it that you may not have realized. So you might know all of these things, but maybe didn't do all of those things. And it's not because you're not, smart enough to figure it out. It's just that you just didn't. And that's okay. And I don't make judgments. I'm always happy to share all the tips and tricks that I come up with because there's a lot of moving parts to reselling. But I think that when it comes to buying boxes or buying pallets to sell on Poshmark, people get a little bit crazy and complainy and whiny about not getting the best items, not getting the most fantastic box, not being able to make their money back. Like the goal in buying a box should never be to make your money back. The goal is to make profit. You want to go to the thrift store and buy an item and say, oh, I hope I make my money back on this. Like, no, that doesn't work. That's no good. Don't do that. So the goal is to make profit. That's why we're here. It's a business. And so when you buy a box, again, the very first thing I said was like, it needs to be a well-educated decision and you have responsibility in that. But once you've bought it, now it's your turn to make the best of it, whatever you get, whether it's the best box, whether it's the worst box. And I hope that going over some of these sorts and some of these piles help you realize that there is a path to quickly getting to profit and more profit by dividing up the items into the way they can sell the best, perhaps the quickest and the most successfully with the least amount of work involved. And so yes, you could list every single item that you get in your box. You could list every single item that you get in your pallet, but I don't think that's gonna get you any more money any quickly. It might make you more money over a longer period of time, but that's not what people are doing. They're saying, I bought this box, I listed everything, and 6 months later, only 3 items have sold. Well, maybe you should have gotten rid of half of that box and only listed half of it. And then if you sold 3 out of the half, you'd be more happy with what happened. And then you need to just give it a little more time. Maybe you can fix your photos. Maybe there's other things going on that you could improve on. And maybe it wasn't the box. So I'm not here to take anybody's side, but I am here to say that you do have a lot of responsibility in the decisions that you make for your business. And I'm here to help you every step of the way in maximizing and optimizing profit, especially when it comes to these bulk boxes and pallets. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and stick around because next video is going to be all about pallet math. So I'm going to dig deep into the numbers behind the things that we talked about today and break down exactly how much profit you can make and how the profit works out by dividing into these piles and doing these sorts. And so if this made sense to you, that's great, but make sure you come back for that next video that's going to get into all the nitty-gritty of the numbers so you can really see the power of buying in bulk, bulk purchases, and pallets. I should also note that I do order from Helpsy Source as my source for bulk boxes and pallets, and if you use my code Rebecca the Reseller, you can get 10% off of your order. The link is down below, and go ahead and check out my free Poshmark strategies checklist as well down below, and I will see you in the next video.